So after Taylor called in this fake bomb threat, she told Wade that she would deliver instead at McCurtain Memorial Hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma on October 9th. And here's why Oklahoma, by the way, which investigators figured out later. She had already burned her bridges at the Texas hospital. She couldn't use St. Michael's in Texarkana or the hospital in Mount Pleasant because she knew, or they knew, that she had a hysterectomy and could not have children. So Oklahoma was the only place left that wouldn't immediately call her bluff. So on the evening of October 8th, Taylor and Wade went to dinner at Osaka's. They stopped at O'Reilly's so that Wade could grab a plug to check the trailer lights, and then they went home where Wade worked on their truck. Taylor told him that she was going to go visit a friend. That friend was Reagan. Earlier that same morning, Taylor had already driven to Reagan's street and sat outside of her house for a significant chunk of time before eventually leaving. Now that night, she actually went in. Homer had gotten home around 7:15 and the family had sat down for dinner. When Taylor came over, she and Reagan spent about 45 minutes together, and Homer could hear them talking at one point about the nursery. Taylor was offering to help decorate it for Braxlin. Then Homer went to bed. What Reagan did not know is that at 7:26 that same evening, while the two of them sat together in that house, Taylor purchased a brand new phone number on her device, which was a burner phone. 1 minute later, she sent a test text from it to herself, and it worked. So Taylor left just before 10 p.m. and drove home, where she and Wade kept getting ready for the next day before eventually going to bed. Now, whether Taylor slept that night is unclear because her phone was still making like data connections at 12:15 a.m. and then again between 3:11 and 3:30. She made 5 calls from that burner phone to McCurtain Memorial Hospital in Idabel. Some were quick. One of them lasted over like 6 minutes. She had already searched for the hospital 3 separate times. Then on October 9th of 2020 at 3:30 a.m., Wade got up. Taylor was already awake. She told him that she'd been cramping all night and couldn't make the 4-hour drive to Wynnewood to sell those hogs, because remember, she had kind of curated this hog sale with Scott Peterson in Wynnewood. So Wade had offered to cancel that trip and stay with her, but she told him no, they couldn't afford to lose that sale, so he should just go on without her and she would meet him at the hospital in Idabel later on. So Wade agreed and left. Now here's the thing about the hog sale though. Remember, I think I said Scott Peterson, I'm sorry. I meant Scott Robertson. Was the rancher in Wynnewood who had already told Taylor twice that the deal was off. Well, to make sure that Wade would still make that 4-hour trek, Taylor fabricated text messages that looked like they came from Scott, confirming that he would buy the hogs for just $6,100. And the fake text even read like Scott had written it. Here's a snippet of that text. But he's telling Wade that he would see him in the morning, that he had hunters lined up, that he needed the hogs for sure, so to drive safe, even said like, thanks man, at the end. Scott never wrote a word of it. The number it came from wasn't even his. It had a Dallas area code, but Wade did not pick up on that apparently. The entire trip was a setup to get Wade 4 hours away so that Taylor could carry out her plan. After Wade left, Taylor got to work. From around 4:28 a.m., she sat and watched YouTube videos about C-sections and births at 35 weeks specifically. This is not just general pregnancy content. The material focused on the exact gestation that Reagan was at. She left home at 5:26 a.m. in Wade's Toyota Corolla because it got better gas mileage than her own car. Wade then called the burner phone at 6:31 a.m., which was a call that lasted more than 6 minutes. And during it, Taylor pulled into an Easy Mart where surveillance cameras caught her at the register paying $10 for gas. And you could see her clearly on that footage. She was wearing a black jacket with like a leopard print that lined the hood. She had a white t-shirt on, a pair of No Boundaries sandals. She paid and then walked out and then stopped at the McDonald's next door. That Easy Mart was only 1.8 miles away from Reagan's house, which was a 4-minute drive. Meanwhile, Reagan was home with their 3-year-old. Homer had left for work and Reagan was due at the Flying Burger at 9 a.m. where she worked. It was supposed to be her last shift before her maternity leave. And she needed to drop her daughter off at daycare first. So at 7:22 a.m., Reagan's phone got a message from that burner number that Taylor had bought the night before and tested the night before, and Taylor arrived at the house around 7:30. At 7:49 a.m., a second message hit Reagan's phone. 3 minutes later at 7:52 a.m., Reagan sent a reply, and it was the last outgoing activity that was ever recorded on her phone that we believe was actually by Reagan. What happened next is incredibly brutal. I'll save it for the next video so that I can add an appropriate trigger warning.